Not sure if Alan is actually here or not. Alan's a regular in this room, and he sometimes just is there as a placeholder and doesn't actually participate. But he's often listening in the background and then jumps in unexpectedly. You think he's not there, and he jumps in. So just be aware there is a person behind the Alan. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes like I'd like just a witty one-liner. Sometimes is what he jumps in with.
All right. I liked your 5 red flags, Eric. I think they're also very similar for me. The only one that I thought of that was not so much a red flag for totalitarianism all throughout history, but maybe I'm wrong, is the first one, the conflicting and confusing narratives. That there's a narrative for sure, but that they're conflicting and confusing, because back when we got our information from newsprint, sure, you'd have like rogue people put out newsletters possibly, but you didn't have what we have now, which is the internet and the platforms and conspiracy theories and the bots and like all of this. I can hold my worldview and assume yours is exactly like that. You're getting all of the information I'm getting on my newsfeed on yours. And that's almost entirely not true ever for anyone, that they would be getting the same information. But how dare you think differently than me? We've experienced the same information. No, we haven't. And that's kind of like something new on this one that's definitely being used to create that enemy that only they can deal with, yet they can't even deal with the internet, right? Like
yeah, so rather than you're saying in the past, rather than there being conflicting and confusing narratives, there was just one narrative, right? And it was there was just all in on that one, and there wasn't the forum for difference that there is now. I think that's true, but then that can be harnessed, right? Confusion, stress, these are the best conditions under which to manipulate people.
And then also adding in the one that Jamin kind of brought up, which is that I don't think it's new. And so it's that frog in water. It's been happening for maybe a millennia, but definitely centuries, which is that like dependence on the state or the system, that you need us. We need to be here. You need to get your food from us. You need to get your security from us. You need to get you will die without us, even though that's not quite like we could do those things on our own, but that the entire means of production is out of our control. It's not even in the government's control, but it's more in their control than our control. And like, what do we do if we don't have access to toilet paper? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the way you just describe it, it's essentially slavery, right? Slavery through the back door, where you control access to the essentials of life that everybody must have. And in order for them to gain access to those, they have to earn tokens. And how do they earn tokens? Well, by doing the kinds of things that you want them to do. You can give them a choice, right? But you only can do this set of things, right? This is worth tokens. Anything outside of that doesn't get you tokens. And so there's no point doing that. And it's essentially slavery. It's not slavery with whips and chains and beatings, right? But it achieves the same goal. Get people working according to your needs.
Well, our children are born into it, and although they're not able to be as easily taken away by the state and sold to somebody, it still happens. It still happens that you're supposed to send them to education, their education, or you're not a fit parent, that you're supposed to follow their healthcare even pre-2020, or like this is very much that you're a part of it. You have to be a part of it, depending on what borders you're born into and or moved to. I would love to hear from, I know Alan's possibly just listening. I don't know if James is just listening, but Walter's here.
James is usually here, and Walter is once he gets going has plenty to say, I know.
Well, I'll just say hello to all anyway. I just joined, so yeah, I'll join. And of course, once I suppose just absorb a little more, I suppose, to just get the feel of the conversation.
All right. I'm sure Eric and I are happy to drone on if not.
Yeah, sure. But
trying. trying to understand the terminology, because indeed oppressive regimes is basically the nature of the government is an oppression of the citizenry. It's kind of like its role in life when it's not defending the borders, the rest of the time it's oppressing the citizenry, right? It's kind of like, what else could it be doing in its spare time? And it's kind of interesting. Back 100 years ago, people wrote books like, Man versus the State, and it was understood that there is this inherent conflict in there, and that kind of knowledge has dissipated. It's surprising to me, just these real obvious things, how they got forgotten. But anyways, looking at sort of the writings, so apparently one of the defining voices in talking about totalitarianism in 1951, Rand wrote a book basically saying how it's a new form. Basically, the idea is that it's a new thing, that all the oppressive regimes, the Spanish Inquisition and the slavery that was a part of, and conquest and genocide, which was a part of human history always, is actually not that.
No, it's authoritarianism, not totalitarianism. Yeah.
So they distinguish it from basically absolute power, various juntas and absolute monarchies and so on. That's all good. That's a separate thing. So something about, apparently it's a recent development, which I always put into question. I mean, it's like Spanish Inquisition was very much, had similar approaches. Well, all of Inquisitions throughout Europe, right?
Do you mind if I just jump in here for a moment, Walter? Because you've just got me thinking about something which I think might be quite an important thing. This may be what you were saying anyway, and I'm just going to say it slightly differently. But what the authoritarian regimes of the past, the juntas, for example, right? It's easy to know who they are, right? It's obvious who is in power and who is wielding. Whereas I think maybe the difference between what has gone before and the modern version of totalitarianism is not, you can't point your finger at anyone and say they're the ones in power. We don't know who's in power anymore, right? It's murky. We don't actually know who really holds. This is why conspiracy theories are so all over the place, right? Because it is now, we know it's not governments, right? We know that if the presidency of the United States was actually an important position, we would have competent people running for it. So, where does power really live these days? Who knows? Who knows?
What I have written down from Walter Schuren and you, Eric, is that like back in the day when it was kings, and I mean we went from like tribes to kings, that it was blood lineage, generally speaking, and you were born to those people. You were the firstborn son by the will of God, right? You're meant to, and it didn't really matter your disposition. You could be an amazing ruler or a horrific ruler. You are the next one in power unless someone offs you. And with that is also religion, right? That like the clergy of whatever their version is also seem to have that position of like they spoke for God. So and so I went from like blood to steel, right? It went from like that lineage to like whoever might equals right. And it all kind of is in the name of God, right? It's like, well, like back before the last, I would say.
God is where you got your authority from.
60 years. It's like, well, if God didn't want us to own slaves, if God didn't want me to take over this land, he would stop me. He would like give me a sign that I'm supposed to take it over. He would come and smite all those people and give me the land. It's like, no, I'm working under that guise. And there still seems to be even a bit of that it's like science has somewhat become our God without actually allowing it to be. Like, it's like the science is spoken, and it's like, well, good, show me the science. Science isn't God. We can see the science. And it's like, no, you do the work and it's all laid out. You're just stupid if you haven't read it and understand it. It's like, that's not science. That's, if you've been in a science lab, if you've been in any, like, it's always debate, always not black and white, and talking about the gray area. And the amount of suppression of that debate and the amount of suppression of, like, the other side are idiots is astounding. I know I've been going on for a bit, but I just did a TikTok talking about how with COVID, it's not the vaccinated versus unvaccinated as much as that's the media report. It's the infected versus the uninfected, and everything's happening so that we don't know the difference, right? Like, heaven forbid we put time and energy and money into making better COVID tests, if they're possible, and so that you know your status, so you can not leave the house or not infect other people. Because there's, in my mind, in the video, there's two people that are spreading it. The people who think it's a complete conspiracy, and even when they have it and they're in the hospital, they're like, I don't have it, you're just tricking me, and they end up spreading it because they're not going to stop what they're doing when they get it. They're not even going to get tested to find out if they're positive or not. Then the other group are the vaccinated, who are also spreading it because they think they can go about business as usual, but they can't have it. And although they're asymptomatic or really low symptoms, they're going on to spread it. So it's the infection, not the vaccination status. And yet everything's on the vaccination status, and it's the power surrounding it, not even the science. It's like we need to vilify this group, therefore we can't know whether someone has COVID or not. We can't treat it before you're in the hospital because we need those people to be in the hospital so we can point to the unvaccinated and make them villains. We can't give you vitamin C and zinc before you're in the hospital. That would be preposterous. Like, we're trying to make a villain out of a certain group of people, and all of the media is very clearly behind that, like behind that group. Like, of course look at all this science, they're the bad guys. And yet it isn't science. It's not open source science. It's for profit behind a iron curtain science. This is not good. Anyway, sorry, I know I've droned on for a bit. Thanks for letting me vent.
Well, there's three things embedded in what you said there. So the first one is this manipulation of what is supposed to be truthful, objective data, right? It's what we call science, right? It's supposed to be, as you say, not certain, but as best it can be, truthful, objective, unbiased, right? Uncaptured by special interests, that kind of thing, right? It's supposed to be that, but it isn't. So that's one thing. The creation of a subgroup within the population that everybody can point to and blame, that's the second thing, right? And that feels like a really important dynamic. Every oppressive regime that I can think of, there was a group or groups of people within that society that was singled out for special horrible treatment, right? For whatever reason. And there was a third thing as well. I can't think what it was now. There were three strands that came through in what you were saying there. The third one eludes me now. I should have written them down as you were talking.
Maybe I could add one more. Sorry, Walter and Mike. Go ahead, Walter.
No, you said really good stuff. I think the point number one about errors, cognitive errors that become apparent. So the firmer you hold your sort of knowledge, the more opportunities there are for paradoxes of various kinds. Stuff like with like Christian struggle, where you only go to heaven if you've been, if you've done your Christian thing. So what about all the great people, all the prophets, all the great people who were born before, who died before Christ appeared? And so like struggles like that, just chronology of of events, and you know, the most righteous of the righteous. So yeah, they kind of get in, they get maybe a special, right? So there are logic problems with belief systems if they become too tight, if they become, you know, so likewise. But the important thing to remember that all these ideas, all these notions start as really good. They're not just like, well, people will live pretty good, we're gonna, you know, feed everybody, they'll be pretty comfy. The whole thing is about, we're gonna bring heaven on earth. Everybody's gonna be taken care of. We're gonna get rid of the exploitators. People who work hard will get all the good stuff and their families. Some of them take an angle that, well, we do that for this kind of people, not everybody, but this group of people we care about are gonna get, you know, kind of localized heaven on earth. So all of them start with really nice promises, and I think that in and of itself is a telling sign.
Yeah, thanks for yielding, Walter. I just wanted to pick up on what you were saying about righteousness. Oh, sorry, I've just noticed someone else has joined the room. Do make it known if you're here and wanting to participate, or if you just want to sit and listen, that's fine too. But do just let us know how you want to play it. Tejas, whatever. Yeah, righteousness. I wanted to pick up on that notion in what you were saying, that I think that the playing to people's sense of righteousness, because it feels good to be righteous, right? You know, it feels really, really self-affirming, and, you know, to be able to point at someone else and say they are wrong and I am right, you know, that it feels really good to be able to do that. And I think that the smart totalitarian, let's say, would harness that power of righteousness to set people against each other in such a way that they cannot talk to each other, right? Because you are clearly morally wrong, and to think how you think, I don't want nothing to do with you, right? It's that kind of thing. And so with the vaccinated, unvaccinated thing, the vaccinated will look at the unvaccinated and say, you're selfish, you are putting everyone else in danger for your own petty conspiracy theories or whatever, something like that, right? And the unvaccinated will say to the vaccinated, you are sheep, you're asleep, you're rash, you're stupid, right? And you know, and both feel absolutely justified and righteous in pointing those fingers at the other side, right? And it's unbelievably divisive, this thing. I mean, yet another reason why I think conversations like this are so important, right? So that we can figure out how to bridge some of those divides. Anyway, that's it. That's me done. I just wanted to pick up on righteousness.
One of the things that came up right after I stopped talking was that the reason besides the fact, of course, they're looking to take over power and reduce civil rights, the reason we can't, instead of vilifying the unvaccinated, we can look at the actual what a virus is, and that you have to have it to pass it on. So it's the person who has it and is infected who is the danger to some degree. That infection is temporary, and it's somewhat not a moral dictation, right? Like, you got it from someone else and now you have it. You may have put yourself more at risk, but you now have it and can spread it on. And there's something in the fact that because you get the disease, the virus, and then you get better from it, you're no longer infectious, even if you have long-term implications, you can't vilify those people, right? Like, you're a villain for 2 weeks, which is like, no, just stay inside for 2 weeks. We'll help you. We will bring you groceries. We will bring you chicken soup or vegan chicken soup and like look after you so you don't spread it. Instead, it's this villainization, right? Of like the poor who can't afford to take time off, so they can't even afford to know if they have it. And like this, we need a group to be righteous against. And it's so easy to be righteous against a group that, like exactly what Eric just said, right? Both sides spelled it out. We're righteous, they're idiots. They're selfish, they're whatever else.
Yeah, I mean, I can't help but feeling that the fear that exists around COVID has been maybe the plan all along, right? So you've got people scared of different things, right? And so if you are frightened of the virus, then you're locking yourself indoors because you don't want to come into contact with anyone that's got the virus, or you don't want to spread the virus to people that you care about, right? And so there's that whole domain of fear. If you are on the other side of the debate, then you're frightened of the vaccines themselves, right? I mean, you know, there are narratives out there that say that it's the vaccinated people you should be staying away from. They're the ones shedding the variants, right? You should be staying away from them. And so, you know, it actually doesn't matter what side you're on. You have, through your own lens, good reason to be fearful of the other side, to believe deeply and profoundly that they are putting you at risk, and not just you, everyone at risk, right? And it's a really hard position to not be deeply emotional from, right? Whatever side you're on, it's really, really hard not to get very.
Well,
You
I mean,
muted
the
there for some
stakes are
reason.
very
Yes, I don't know how
high.
that happened. I just noticed. I don't know how that happened. Sorry, Walter, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm done, basically.
I mean, the stakes are fairly high. This, you know, it
Are they not
potentially.
really? Like less than 0.2% of people that get it
No,
die.
no,
And I
no.
know
Hold
death
on,
is not
Eric.
the only thing, but
Let me clue you in. United States, well over 600,000 dead.
whoa.
This
Sorry.
is an order.
I'm sorry, but I need to challenge these numbers, because the way they count deaths is not deaths from COVID. It's deaths within 28 days of receiving a positive COVID test, right? And so if you got hit by a bus or fell down the
Okay,
stairs,
Eric, listen.
you get
If you
counted
look
as a
at
COVID
the
death. So
excess mortality numbers,
there we go. That's the number we need to be looking at, is the excess
so the
deaths
excess
compared to the
mortality
5-year average.
tends
Correct.
to be
That's nowhere near
even.
600,000. Nowhere near.
Are you kidding me? Excess mortality is, at least in California, is about 50% higher than what can be attributed. So basically, it's 1.5 times higher than what we can sign off to.
Okay, I mean, I have to take your word for it. I haven't looked at the California data, but the same is not true in the UK.
Listen, I
The
have a
excess
blog
mortality in the
with
UK is
30
minimal. It's like less
posts
than
on the
10%.
subject. I've really done research.
No, fair enough, and I'll take your word for it. I'm just saying, in the UK, in the UK, where I am more acquainted with the numbers, the picture is very different. It's about 10%. The increase in excess mortality compared to the 5-year average is about 10%, not 50%, right? So, yeah, as I say, I come into contact with different numbers.
Okay, the other thing I can offer, because the West is basically confused. So I listen to what comes out of Asia, Eastern Europe, and so on, and none of them are taking it as a joke, as not deadly, and so on. You know, you want to see mass graves in Latin America with people dead, the photos are online. So listen, so really saying it's not there.
I'm not saying it's not there. No. I'm not saying it's not there. That's no. But please don't get no. I'm not saying it's not there. I'm saying
the
that it has been massively
I'm gonna interrupt
is
because
what
we
I'm
can
saying.
get on the COVID debate. The debate is on totalitarianism,
listen,
and then
you
using
gotta
it
get real
for to take our rights. So if you can bring it back to that, then it's the deaths.
Yeah.
There might be a reason to say, well, maybe they should take over if there's that many deaths, right? And I'm willing to give up my civil liberties for health. Public health. I'm not, because I think
it does
there's
speak
a bigger
to our
health risk
inability to find information that we can all agree on, right? I mean, we can't even. There's a really good example. We can't even agree on data. We can't even agree on facts, right? And so
confusing narratives.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But I mean, I'm sure Walter's done the same thing. But I mean, the numbers I'm quoting from the UK are based on government numbers, right? I'm not going elsewhere. These are, you know, government issued numbers. So
listen, excess mortality you cannot argue with, because these are actual death certificates. All right.
No, I agree. Number of deaths, I agree with. It's the attributing to COVID bit that I have. I don't have a problem with the counting of the number of deaths. But the other thing is as well, the COVID test. Anyway, do you know what? Sorry, Jubilee, you've just admonished against this, and we're not going to go down this road. Another time, Walter, I'm happy to get into this with you one-on-one sometime. I'd be very happy to have this discussion with you.
But I do think that that piece you guys are touching on, of like, part of my desperation during this time period is that nobody can trust any of the data, and we can't ask, where did those numbers come from? How do we know?
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be a debate, right? It shouldn't be, well, I did this and I did this. It should be, you ask, where did those numbers come from? And it's a cut or dry. They do this within 28 days, or they do this, and they do this in the UK, and they do this in the US, but they don't. And it's part of the division. It's part of, we need data. We need open source science. Science is never going to be black and white, but we need to be able to look at it. We need to like elect scientists to be that are impartial, to look at the data, that don't have a vested interest in one way or the other, except their own personal health. So we need people on the freedom side and people on the health side coming together and looking at the data and actually saying, yes, this is what we can trust. But we have to be able to allow questions and then have a catalog of the answers.
Well, therein is the hello, Dan. Welcome back, man. Just in the middle of a conversation there, mainly on totalitarianism, which you'll probably enjoy. Dan, I'm not sure if you're used, if you've met any of the others. Eric is hosting there at the moment, and Jubilee and Walter. Everybody that's done. But yeah, just sorry there, just in relation to what you're just saying, like what Eric was saying a while ago, the fact that there's opposing sides and they really believe in what they believe in, and then, you know, there's the other side, they believe in what they believe in, and then literally within minutes, both yourself and Walter got kind of dragged into one of those actually opposing conversations. And that is the problem. That is, and you're right, and is what you were saying earlier as well, Eric. That is the problem. The problem is that regardless of where the COVID came from, and it is a fact that COVID is out there, but regardless of where it came from, regardless of or even the fact around where it came from is another conspiracy, but yet another reason to argue and cause separation, all just around one particular subject, which is COVID. The vaccines is another argument, but the point is, you're getting back to what you said earlier, that is what they've been known for all down through the years. Totalitarian regimes were going into a different country, getting the lay of the land and figuring out the people, the topic of conversation, and seizing upon an opportunity to cause division. So COVID just came along at a perfect time. It's another opportunity to cause division among the general population, and the best way to do that is as Jubilee was saying, by not putting out the right information, by putting out misinformation, by making it a political issue. All these are all instruments of manipulation to cause confusion. And the real questions we should be asking ourselves is, what are they causing the confusion for? Why are they confusing us, and what are they trying to distract us from? What is the real agenda they're trying to distract us from? Because if it's not COVID, no, it's Afghanistan. What they're doing in Afghanistan is a tragedy and a sin, and it's also done because it's causing all sorts of separation and argument again around the place. So it's no different than going out and strangling a black man on the street. They get it, you know, and letting the justice not be done properly. That causes division, and it causes turmoil, it causes distraction. Distraction. That's all they seem to be coming out with, one after the other. We should be asking ourselves, what are they distracting us from? And if what they're distracting us from is the truth of what's coming down the line, what the IPCC are even lying about. And it's known that the IPCC, when it was set up, the Americans had initially opted into it to use it as a method to actually deny climate change and the extremities of it, so that they can control people's narrative about the climate change and let people think that they have it all in hand and they're in charge and they got it covered, when in fact they don't. So we should be asking ourselves, what is the fucking the subject they're trying to distract us from?
We've got 3 or 4 minutes left before I'm going to call the other room back, so we should start giving some thought to our synopsis to them, kind of thing. So anyone with a good memory, do you want to jump in? Anyone with a decent memory that's been here for most of the conversation, want to jump in with what are the main points of interest that we've touched on during this? I have a terrible memory. I mean, I've written a couple of things down. This thing about not being able to trust data, facts, information, you know, can't even agree on basic things like facts and data. and that has led to the whole notion of scientific inquiry having, been not trusted itself anymore, right? Like that whole platform foundational thing is not trusted anymore.
Yeah, and when I came in, you were also talking when I came in about the education system and how that's manipulated, what that people are born into the situation, have no choice but to get it on board with it.
Yeah, you have no choice but to go through their education system and eat their food and live in it. Yeah, and pay their taxes, that kind of thing. No choice but to do that. That was on the notion of sort of structural totalitarianism that is and already exists and has done for a long time and has become completely normalized for us. That was on that sort of strand, wasn't it? Yeah. Are you making notes, Jubilee? I can see you writing. Are you making notes? Good girl.
No, and I won't be able to do the synopsis. My kid has a game crisis I'm trying to help with.
Oh, I see. Okay.
As far as the belief in science, I mean, to me, it's a preposterous notion. The whole point of science is that you don't have to believe in it. It's like belief means you are not sure it's true, but you hold it to be true. And the scientific method is supposed to be something else.
You can show it's not true using science, right? You can't show it is true, but you can show it's not true. Yeah, absolutely. It's falsification, isn't it? It rests on the notion of falsification, being able to falsify something. If you can't falsify it, it's not. It doesn't have scientific
showing
merit.
that it's true in observable universe. It's also a pretty useful result. But as far as the regimes, they're big.
Sorry, Walter. I'm really sorry to interrupt you again, but can we focus on the synopsis for now? Because the other group's going to come back in a minute or two, and so rather than continue the discussion, which we will have time to do after we've had a break, but can we just focus on trying to get a synopsis together for the other group? Is there anything else that anyone else?
I missed everything you said during the synopsis because of the timing.
Oh, right. Okay.
But that we talked about righteousness,
Oh,
creating
yeah,
the
good
enemy,
one.
that the what I talked about, that it's the infected, but I don't know how to bring that back to totalitarianism without bringing the virus into it. That like the group needs to be, in order to feel righteous against the group, right? It needs to be a permanent status thing. It needs to be that something that like gets you in righteousness, which someone being temporarily infected just doesn't. So yeah, something to that essence. But the confusing narrative, I think, is what we talked about a lot. The data and the confusing narrative, and us versus them.
It's not that it's confusing, but it's ripe for overstating, what it really knows. And so cognitive errors become progressively more and more obvious.
You also talked about the difference between authoritarianism and totalitarianism. So
good man, thank you.
Yeah, the history of when it came about and why, or not why, but the difference between historical by different name.
All right, that's fine. I've got more than enough. I've got more than enough. Thank you.
Back to the substance, I would posit that the conditions for totalitarianism, thanks, Jim, the conditions for totalitarianism are ever present insofar as we do not have total freedom to engage in inquiry at a moment's notice on the fundamental questions such as, who am I? Why am I here? Who are we? Why are we here? And really make that part of the culture. To the extent we take those off the table, either culturally or within a family unit or within a small church or parish or within a city-state, country, whatever, or even language, to the extent we take that off the table systematically, we have set the stage for totalitarianism, right? As if to say, those questions are answered, and they're either answered in this book, or they're answered by me, the authoritarian, or they're answered by, religion, or they're answered by culture, or whatever. We have the necessary conditions for totalitarianism. I made the point in the previous breakout room that what we're doing right here in these conversations is exactly the opposite of totalitarianism, because we're embracing our own inherent freedom to explore and question, right? And with that, I pass the talking to Heather. Thank you.
Have you got anything, Tony? Otherwise, there's something I'd like to say in response to what Jim said before, but if you've got anything, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm constantly amazed. Well, I stumbled on a couple of terms recently that were new to me with that movie, The Social Dilemma, surveillance capitalism and persuasion technology. The persuasion technology, the key point of that is you're persuaded and you're not really even aware of it. And surveillance capitalism, I mean, people worry about being attacked by artificial intelligence robots. Well, that's already happening with cell phones and such as that, to a degree that is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, I've been studying media since the 60s, and I thought I had a good grip on it, but it's a whole new world right now. And it never ceases to amaze me, integral to advertising is that they tell their customers what the customers want to hear. So whether it's true or not, you can find a news channel that'll tell you what you want to hear. The days of Walter Cronkite, where he objectively presented the news, are long gone. And I'm not really sure how we're going to be able to deal with that. I have high hopes for the arts, but it's so glaringly obvious. I don't watch television, and when I go to some place that has, like I went to a Super Bowl party a couple of years ago, just mostly for the people, and then with the commercials there, I could not believe, what is that world? I mean, I felt so disassociated. It was just incredible. But at any rate, I see that as two of the primary problems, because whether corporations want to admit it or not, media corporations, they can design people's responses. It's not that difficult anymore. And you somehow need to get out of that loop, I guess. I'm not sure. Just asking a lot of questions, no solution.
Well, it's often healthier, isn't it, to pose questions rather than offer solutions when it's such a complex world. But this is nothing new, is it? I mean, advertising, this goes back a long time. I mean, what was his name? Edward de Bernays, and the guy that used to run General Motors. He did this thing of changing the color every year so that people would want to buy a new car every year, even though their old one was perfectly fine. This ability to manipulate our limbic system or whatever to create a demand for something, right? I mean, they and whoever they are, I'm not going to get into that, but they have become very, very, very good at doing this. And not just to sell us shit, but to manipulate our political choices and our behaviors and blah, 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 blah. I have no doubt they're way better at it than any of us give them credit for, right? And we're all pretty cynical, and I suspect they're way better at it than any of us give them credit for, right? The other thing I just wanted to say in response to what Jim was saying before, that in 1984, it's the state, and now it's the sort of corporate thing. I'm not sure that distinction even really exists anymore. And this is part of what's so dangerous, I think, in the world now, is that, I mean, we all know that regulatory bodies get captured by the industries that they're meant to regulate, right? It's been going on for a long time. But I mean, the degree to which that mission has now been completed, the idea of the three pillars of society, the market, government, and the people, where each checks the worst excesses of the other, right? The market doesn't provide everything that every individual wants. They're only going to provide what it can make a profit out of. The market cannot be left unconstrained, or it starts to sell children into slavery, right? Because there's profit to be made there. The government has to constrain the market from going down its worst avenues, right? And has to have a monopoly on force so that it can do that, however powerful the corporations get. And it is our job as the people to constrain the worst excesses of government, because all governments tend towards authoritarianism, right? It's an inevitable thing of putting power in a centralized places, that it will tend towards authoritarianism. But what has happened now is that the market and the government have merged into this, whatever you want to call it, beast. And we, the people, uneducated, disempowered, unarmed, ignorant, stupid, no access to technology compared to what the market government complex has. This is why I think we're in such a very, 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 very dangerous position where totalitarianism is concerned. I mean, we're 90% of the way to complete and utter subjugation to this monster. And yeah, we got 10% left to save ourselves. That's kind of how I see it.
Are we raising our hands? James got his hand up. Is that?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Yeah, in direct response to what Eric just said. So the following is an oversimplification. And as is probably pretty much anything that can come out of our mouths. But it used to be, in the good old days of Walter Cronkite, et cetera, that the media was, a watchdog on government. And the private sector really kind of was hands off in terms of both government and the media and religion and nonprofit. They kind of did their thing. And so, there was this nice balance. But for Eric's point, the government, the media, the private sector, right, which controls the media, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, are all kind of merging into this weird hyper object that's for which, the public, it's just open season on the public. We want your money, we want your vote, we want anything we can get from you, your attention, your opinion, et cetera, et cetera. Now, here's the general principle from software. The antivirus software needs to be smarter than the viruses, right? And yet here we've got a case where this hyperobject virus has just grown, and the people are systematically and intentionally picked apart, right? We are fragmented. I posit our last remaining hope in the midst of this growth of totalitarianism, the growth of this hyperobject, this evil hyperobject I was just mentioning, et cetera, et cetera. The last remaining hope, and I think the window is closing quickly on it, is for humanity to come together, for the people to come together outside of these institutions, outside of any institution, whether it's the Republican Party or Extinction Rebellion or anything else that has hierarchical structure, and where someone at the top seems, whether it's Donald Trump or the head of Extinction Rebellion, claims that they have, the answer. I believe the people coming together in a decentralized way, doing exactly the kinds of things that we're doing in this very room and that other folks are doing in the breakout room, and by extension, this whole network of conversations is doing. This is our last best hope. And the clock is ticking on us really realizing this and putting it into action. And I think we can run circles around that malevolent hyper object by the very nature of the freedom of thought. Free thinking groups will have much more intelligence than hierarchical, authoritarian, totalitarian groups. So we've got a natural advantage. We just need to put on our jerseys and get on the playing field. And with that, I pass the feather. Thank you.
And I'd like to respond with that. One of the things I've been doing for quite a while, years, decades, a decade at least, as an effort to synthesize political activism and spirituality, is something that I call my SMILE program. And what that is every day, I'm retired now, but I used to travel all over Metro Denver area. Every day before I left to do my work, I'd make a commitment to have a positive, apolitical, authentic conversation with at least 7 people that I'd never seen before in my entire life. And it was just astounding. We've been too busy doing it to write stuff down about it, but to see the look in other people's eyes when they recognize the mutual humanity. You know, I mean, is just astonishing. I mean, and it's so life affirming, and it's just, you know, you get more out of it than what you could possibly give. And you know, I mean, I've even had checkers at supermarkets that have gotten to know me. You know, tell me, you know, if you have an extra 10 or 15 minutes, will you stand here at the end of the counter here and just tell our customers jokes and talk to them for a minute or two? And you know, the thing about it is, you get different responses from that, you know, and some people, you know, okay, that's fine, ha ha ha, on and on and on. You get other people that are really intrigued. Well, whenever I find anybody that's intrigued, I tell them, you know, I mean, you give it a try. Give it a try. Go out there and try it yourself. And just imagine if we could get 5 people out of 100 one day or every day having a positive, apolitical, authentic conversation with another person that they didn't know, you know, and it's my hope that by spreading that kind of grassroots action, that we can really get some stuff going here really quick. We've got the information and we have access. We can get, you know, tell people about it, but it's just a matter of, like Jamin was saying, putting a jersey on and getting out there. And, you know, you don't, it's easy to tell if you're intruding. That's a simple thing. And for myself, I use a lot of comedy. And so, you know, that's immediately people really get a kick out of that. And so that opens some gates right there. But there's a lot of different ways of interacting with people. And now is a time and this is a place, because it's been an ongoing society of separation for decades. And we need to change that however we can. I've never had any fear of jousting windmills, and I'm not going to start being afraid of it now.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. What Eric was saying about market government and people, I think actually I'm quite sure the problem is the market. There's a single market now, and the market is in consumption, and there's a fundamental problem with economy, and the economy doesn't allow for restoration. It doesn't include restoration. It just includes consumption, and that forces the government and the people into deciding how much consumption each of the individuals can have. But with abundant restoration, there's a whole nother system, and you do have the market, the government, and the people, but it's a parallel market. It's called market policy dualism. There's almost nobody that thinks this way. I happen to be one of those people that do. So whenever I look at the way government or corporations are working, they're only working in the single marketplace, which has a rule set. And the rule set is essentially what monopoly is. It comes from the game of Monopoly, really describes the rule set of the present economy. And because the rules are so well understood, it's hard to get out of them. It's hard to make another system. It's hard to improve or modify the system, just like any other game. It's called a Nash equilibrium. Once the rules are understood, that they're set in a certain equilibrium. So the only way out of that situation is make a parallel system. And now we have an opportunity to do that because of the climate crisis, to create a separate market. The marketplace would be for negative carbon or mitigated carbon actions. So because we're in a climate crisis, it's global. That the policy, the market policy would be an abundant. Let's see how there's a permanent marketplace for carbon mitigation services until that task is done. The task is 1 or 2 trillion tons. It's a lot of work. It's going to take 50 years to do it. But if we don't finance that, then we don't have a chance at stabilizing the thermodynamics of the planet. So it's an odd position to be in. So when I hear about, well, totalitarianism or corporatism or anything from, Apple Computer to Extinction Rebellion, I see that all operating in a single system, and that system is a consumptive economy. Without a restorative economy, we don't have a chance anyway. So once we set up a restorative economy, which is there's a clear path to it. I think it's inevitable that we will have that. Whether we do it in time isn't known. But setting up another system, it has different requirements and different organization too. It's just an odd place to be, you know, to be in that dualism, because I do live in a market dualism. So I don't see the fight in the single system, because there's no way to win in a single system. I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, it makes a great deal of sense, and I completely agree with you. I mean, that sort of tripartite thing depends on this sort of existing tension that exists. And you're quite right, in the market that is balanced, say, right, has a restorative dimension to it, and so it is a balanced economy rather than a one-way processing thing, right? Something that closes its loops, that sort of thing. Then that tension between people and market and government and market, well, there's still tensions between them, but they become very, very different kinds of tensions, right? Yeah, no, absolutely. And I sorry, I just wanted to amplify something that Jamin was saying, that also in that the media is the fourth estate, right? An independent investigative press. It was always called the fourth estate, and it is. I mean, I guess I would include the fourth estate as us, part of the people, right? The fourth estate works for the people in order to uncover the wrongdoings in the other two domains, right? So they serve us, the people, but it's supposed to be an independent and empowered thing. And this is something that's very much been going on in the world over the last couple of decades. In particular, is the defunding of newsrooms, right? In papers and TV stations and radio stations all over the world. There are a tiny few news gathering agencies now, right? And those clips are just sent out to all of the other transmitters, and they're all transmitting essentially exactly the same news. The degree to which stuff does not get verified and investigated before getting reported is absolutely staggering. I can't remember. Conan O'Brien, that's it. Conan O'Brien did an expose on this a few years ago. There's loads of clips on YouTube where the same news item is read out on 100 different news channels, but verbatim, like word for word, exactly the same, even the same intonations and the same rhythm, right? Like all of these hundreds of newscasters have basically just, you know, they're parroting exactly the same press release. So yeah, the absence of any kind of effective fourth estate, and those that try to be an actual fourth estate, the Julian Assanges and so on of this world, right? What happens to them? You know, he's done nothing but report information that has come his way. That's all he's done, right? That's all that he has done. He is a journalist. By any definition of the term, he is a journalist, and that's all that he is. And yet look at what's happened to him, right? No wonder journalists don't go out there and investigate the rich and powerful anymore, because look at what the fuck happens to you when you find stuff out about them. Anyway, that's me ranted over.
Yeah, no, good stuff, Eric. You know, to Jim's point, in terms of the restorative economy, you mentioned one. I would say there's not just one new alternative marketplace, the market for, you know, carbon sequestration, mitigation, however you put it. But at least four principal ones. So there is that one, yes, for carbon. Another is a market for solar radiation management for reflecting sunlight back into space. A third for ecosystem restoration. And a fourth for kind of, you know, doing something of an opposite of the consumptive economy, which is an economy of sharing and of communion and of healing among humanity as caretaker species, so that we can be more effective in the other three of the four major pillars of a restorative economy, or if you prefer, four different restorative economies, all of which to mitigate and counter the omnicidal effects of the consumptive economy. So just wanted to throw that in there. And undergirding all such economies, alternate economies, etc., is the collective intelligence of all of us coming together in a network of conversations like this one that I keep coming back to as the ultimate antidote to totalitarianism, right? And I'm kind of thinking, you know, if taken to its perfect extreme, this collective intelligence as a network of conversations that's hyperlinked and searchable and transparent and all these good things that doesn't have censorship, etc. Anyone could come from any walk of life, any culture, any background, any brainwashing, right? And find kind of the perfect entry point for them, or be guided to that perfect entry point. Oh, you've just come from, you know, a lifetime of brainwashing from, you know, religion XYZ. Here, we've got the perfect kind of mental and spiritual antivirus plan, or we have multiple different antivirus plans for, you know, scrubbing your hard drive and, you know, liberating you. Liberate mankind, right? Liberate humankind, et cetera, et cetera. That's really the key, is liberation. So we need these multiple different vectors of liberation to kind of bring us all back to a neutral, level playing field upon which we can then come together and collectively and as well as individually answer the fundamental questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Who are we? Why are we here? What's it all about? Which is both what we do as humans, which is a beautiful thing. It's kind of like the fundamental gift, blessing, you know, the ultimate blessing that gives us even the possibility of emerging from this omnicide that we're in. I mean, imagine we were just a bunch of bacteria that had overrun the planet and just consume. It'd be pretty hopeless, I would posit. So let us embrace this fundamental blessing and really take it to the next level and keep taking it to the next level to finally overturn the tyrannies that we've been discussing today. Thank you. Passing the feather.
Well, let's just give a little bit of thought to a synopsis. The others are on their way back shortly, so let's just give a little bit of thought to a synopsis.
Let me. I think we can do with just two economies. You know, the fiat currency dollar economy as consumption, but the parallel restorative economy, actually measuring in carbon dioxide equivalent over time, definitely fits in with solar radiation management, because Dr. Yi Tao gave an 8-foot by 8-foot measurement as reflective as being worth a ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. Well, there's a measurement right there. And there's other measurements too on the social good aspects of it. So I think a dual economy would work. That's my opinion.